Welcome to Your Healthy Kitchen from Dignity Health Yavapai Regional Medical Center.
Welcome to Dignity Health, YRMC's Your Healthy Kitchen. I'm your host, Rita Carey Rubin. Managing and balancing blood sugar levels are vitally important to people with diabetes. After all, there's a direct link between frequently high and low blood sugar levels and an increased risk of heart disease, heart failure, kidney disease, blindness, nerve damage, and even dementia. However, when blood sugar levels are closer to normal with fewer big spikes and dips, the risk for all those potential complications goes way down. So the good news is that we have a lot of tools we can use to get glucose under control, including medications, movement, and meals, plus great technology that makes it easier to track glucose numbers, patterns, and trends. So there's a lot to talk about. So for now, let's just focus on meals and start cooking. I have a fresh and flavorful recipe to share with you today that's packed with many of the nutrients we need for good glucose control. And it's an easy salad made with quinoa, ginger, basil, mint, and some citrus. So quinoa is actually one of my favorite grains. It's actually not technically a grain, it's called a pseudo cereal or a pseudo grain. And it's in the amaranth family, which means it's related to amaranth, but also spinach, beets, and Swiss chard. And when it grows, it gets this tall spike with flowers and then a whole bunch of seeds, thousands and thousands of seeds per plant. It's a native of South America and Peru especially, but it's grown all over the world now. And quinoa has become really a favored grain, I'll just call it a grain, because it is so packed with nutrition. It's really high in protein and fiber, lots of minerals, phytochemicals. It has carbohydrate, but not quite as starchy as some other grains. And it's really, really easy to cook. Really, just 15-20 minutes and it's done from start to finish. And it's also gluten-free. And it has a low glycemic index, which means that it has a less of a impact on your blood sugars when you eat it. So less impact than perhaps another grain like rice or oats. So super great food for people with diabetes or without it. It's just really, really good. So it's really easy to prepare quinoa. It doesn't need any special preparation, except when you, before you cook it, you just want to pour it into a sieve, a fine mesh sieve like this, and rinse it really well. There's actually a little bit of a chemical on the outside of the seed. It's a natural chemical that the seed just makes for its own protection. It protects it against pests. But it has a little bit of a bitter flavor to it, and though I don't notice it, some people are more sensitive to that flavor. So just give it a good rinse for a couple minutes under running water in the sink, and then it's ready to cook. So to cook it, just use 2 parts water to 1 part quinoa, so 2 cups of water to 1 cup of quinoa, and bring the water to a boil. You could also use broth if you want to add more flavor to the quinoa. And then once it's boiled, bring it down, turn the heat down, and let it simmer for 15-20 minutes. And so I have some cooked quinoa in my pot here. And once it's cooked, you just fluff it up. And it expands quite a bit. So this was 1 cup of quinoa, about that much, maybe a little bit less than that. And just like any other grain, it expands and it gets kind of fluffy. And it's got this lovely texture. I really love quinoa. I think it has more flavor than many grains do. And it also has like a little bit of not a crunch necessarily, but it's kind of toothy. Another great thing about quinoa is, unlike other grains like rice, when you put it in the refrigerator, the starch stays soft. So with like rice, when you put it in the fridge, if you want to make like a rice salad, or if you've had sushi after it's been refrigerated, the rice gets kind of hard and crunchy. Doesn't happen with quinoa. So it makes a really good grain for a cold salad, which is what we're going to make right now. So I'm just scooping out the quinoa. And this recipe is adapted from one by Rebecca Katz, one of my favorite chefs and cookbook authors. I use her recipes a lot. She was very kind enough to give me permission to use her recipes forevermore after I kept bugging her with emails asking for permission. And she just has great recipes. They're well tested, and they're bright and flavorful and easy and packed with nutrition. So this is a little bit different from hers, and I'll mention what the differences are in a sec. So I've got my quinoa. I'm going to add some fresh ginger and about a teaspoon. And you can grate your ginger or just mince it, finely mince it. I tend to like to mince the ginger, and because usually when I grate it, I wind up grating my knuckles. So mincing it is just as easy for me. So I'm just chopping this into small pieces. And ginger, in addition to being so flavorful, and oh my gosh, it smells so wonderful, it's packed with, it actually has a lot of fiber, it has minerals, it has phytochemicals that are really important for reducing inflammation in the body. And all those phytochemicals that you find in plants really help prevent chronic diseases, including diabetes. So the more flavor you can put into your foods using herbs and spices, actually the healthier it is. So I've got maybe a little more than a teaspoon, but I like it to have a little kick here of fresh ginger. I'll throw that in with my quinoa. Just toss it around. I'm just going to put in a little bit of salt because this recipe has so much flavor. I put about a pinch, quarter of a teaspoon, maybe less, of salt in the quinoa when I cooked it. And maybe that's another pinch right there. And certainly you can adjust it, but I would say start slow with the salt because you'll notice with all the herbs and the citrus that we're going to put in here, it has a lot of flavor. And you don't necessarily need to add the salt. So next thing is some green peas, one of my favorite things to have in the freezer. And Rebecca's recipe calls for edamame instead of the peas. And I use peas because, frankly, it's easier to find. So these are just frozen peas. They're less expensive. And they are really nutritious. They have a lot of fiber. They have a lot of protein and phytochemicals. They don't, it's not soy, so some people don't eat soy. But it tastes really great in here. And so you can also use frozen edamame thawed. So these are just frozen peas that have just been thawed. So next is just some red bell pepper and any fruits and vegetables. You know, the darker the color, the better, right? So we have dark reds and greens and purples and oranges. The more color in your food, the healthier it is. Because all of the phytochemicals that we find in plants, the things that have protective qualities for our health, most of them have a color to them. And that's why you've probably read or heard about the strategy to eat through the rainbow. So making sure that the foods on your plate throughout the day or throughout the week are very colorful, because that color means that they're more nutritious. So here's my bell pepper, lots of bright flavor, vitamin C, beta carotene. You could add other vegetables as well. So I could grate up some carrots, or maybe some jicama might taste really good in here. Some red onion, lots and lots of possibilities. So then, after the pepper, there's really just a few more ingredients that I'm going to add, mostly for flavor. And so I've got 3 herbs, and you can play with the herbs to use whatever you have on hand or whatever you like. I'm going to put some fresh mint in there from my garden. It smells so good. Some fresh basil. And also some chives. You can use scallions, and if you see the recipe, The recipe calls for a couple of scallions, greens and white parts to put in there, but I had some chives. So I'm just going to put those in there. And with chives, I really like to just use scissors to chop them. It's way easier than using a knife. So I'm just eyeballing this. I like a lot of flavor. The recipe, I think, calls for, like, 2 scallions, but just winging it here a little bit. That looks like plenty. Again, the smells so fresh. And just some basil, about a couple tablespoons of chopped or sliced basil. And so all these herbs, another source of important phytochemicals that help to protect from disease, including diabetes. And phytochemicals can help with diabetes in a number of ways, but a lot of studies show that the phytochemicals in plants can help your insulin to work better. So whether you have type 1 diabetes or type 2, whether you take insulin or not, with diabetes, there's usually a problem with insulin being able to get sugar out of your bloodstream and into your cells. We call that insulin resistance. And the phytochemicals in herbs can help to lower that insulin resistance. And in general, most of the nutrients in plants that are important help with that. So they help lower insulin resistance, and they help the movement of sugar into the cells. In fact, there's a lot of research that shows the more plant-forward our diet is, so the more plants we eat, the better blood sugars are. There's been a lot of studies that show reversal of diabetes in some cases, and definitely prevention and good management of blood sugars with a more plant-forward diet. So that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be a vegan or a vegetarian. Just put more plants on your plate, because it just helps your body in all sorts of ways. So I have a very aromatic bowl right here. It smells really good. And so now I'm just going to make the dressing. The dressing is simply some citrus. So I have some lemon and a couple tablespoons of lemon juice, a couple tablespoons of olive oil, and we'll put a little bit of lime juice in there as well. And then to really brighten the flavor even more, we'll add some zest. And zest is just the bright outer layer of citrus fruit. And you can use a knife, if you have a nice sharp knife, to just slice the zest from the skin of the citrus. Or if you have a zester, this is one of my favorite tools, a microplane, and I'm just lightly scraping the skin to get that nice colorful zest. So another area where it's just packed with phytochemicals, because they've got that bright color, packed with flavor, that's where a lot of those essential oils are right in the outer part of the skin. Yeah, and it just makes the flavor pop. So, and that's it. That's the salad. You can, again, adjust the flavors, so taste it and see if you want a little bit more salt. You need a little bit more citrus or olive oil, more pop with your ginger. You could add some chilies, some fresh chilies would be really nice. And then just to add some added crunch and a little more protein, a little more nutrients, I'm going to throw in a little bit, some peanuts. They go really well with this flavor profile here. So this is really a great salad to make ahead of time and just keep it in your fridge. I've been eating the batch that I made this week over the last couple days. And like I said before, the quinoa doesn't get hard and crunchy if it's been refrigerated. It stays nice and moist. So super good meal to make ahead of time and eat the leftovers and enjoy them. So let's talk a little bit more about food and meals and diabetes. And generally when we talk about diabetes or read things about diabetes, the focus is on carbohydrates. And that's certainly important because carbohydrates, when we digest them, turn to sugar, and sugar goes to our blood. And then we need to move that sugar into the cells because the cells use that for energy. So we don't need to cut out carbohydrates, but what's important is to try to choose carbohydrates that digest slowly and turn to sugar slowly. So those are generally whole foods, so foods that haven't been highly processed, like whole grains like quinoa or brown rice, or barley, or fruits and vegetables and beans and lentils. So those foods that are less processed take longer to digest, essentially. And then the carbohydrate turns to sugar more slowly, and your body can handle that. It can keep blood sugars under control. But there's other nutrients in foods that are equally important. And so that includes things like fiber, B vitamins, vitamin D, and calcium as well, chromium, magnesium, selenium, zinc, phytochemicals, and healthy fats. So when we look at food, a healthy diet for diabetes, it's a whole foods diet because all of those nutrients play a role in, again, helping your body get sugar out of the bloodstream into your cells. And most of those nutrients are in this dish, believe it or not. The only thing that's not in there is vitamin D. And that we need to get from the sun, or we take a supplement. And you definitely want to get your vitamin D levels checked and see where they're at. Another really important cornerstone of diabetes management is movement. And we know that when we move, when we just contract the muscles in our body, those muscles become hungry and really sensitive to insulin. And what that means is that the insulin in our bodies can move sugar into our cells easier and faster. Even if there's an absence of insulin, muscle cells, when they're moving, can pull sugar out of the bloodstream. So we know that movement is like breathing when you have diabetes. It's so essential. Medications, also another leg in that stool of taking care of yourself with diabetes, and talking to your doctor or diabetes educator. Talk to a team about all the pieces that you can pull together to help manage your diabetes. That's why it's really important to have a collaborative team of healthcare providers. That includes a dietitian and diabetes educator. It just can be incredibly valuable. And because a team like that can provide the time and insight it often takes to figure out what works best for you and your glucose control. So Dignity Health Yavapai Regional Medical Center offers an excellent diabetes education program that includes classes and individual counseling on diet, blood sugar management, and lots more. So give them a call to find out more. It's really a great program. And as always, be sure to check out all of our diabetes-friendly recipes and videos at yrmchealthconnect.org. All of our recipes feature whole, nutrient-packed ingredients that are easy to find and they're affordable. And also remember to follow me on Facebook at YRMC's Your Healthy Kitchen. And that's where I post photos, videos, and recipes of the meals I make at home, plus links to my favorite food and gardening destinations on the web. So until next time, eat well and be well, and we'll see you soon.